Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're in Treaty 1 territory in the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Ron Merrick. I'll be your chairperson this afternoon. Introducing the panel members, to my left is Linda McFadden, and to her left is Ed Sawatsky. Representing the city from the Assessment Department is Jeremy Cole. Our recording secretary is Kara Balchow. Kara. We'll be hearing an application for revision of the assessment roll according to the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision has been described in each application, and will limit discussions to those matters. The statement that the applicant or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anybody speaking in these matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons of assessments of property are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by council and is independent of it, along with the city administration. We make decisions based on the evidence provided at this hearing and issue a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decision in respect to application may be appealed to the members of the municipal board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to an application for exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included in the board's order. In respect to the hearing this afternoon, I will present the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the other applicant may have, and then it will be the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each party will have the opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all evidence about the application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket this afternoon. The session will close after all applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live stream recorded and will be part of the public record. I'll ask your secretary to swear in Mr. Cole and to swear in Mr. Mercury.
Please state your name. Do you swear the evidence you present today is the truth and the truth and nothing but the truth only God? Thank you. Please state your name. Do you swear the evidence you present today is the truth and the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name.
James Michael.
Do you swear the evidence you present today is the truth and the truth and nothing but the truth only God? Thank you.
All right, we're going to go to 2735 Pembina Highway, and Mr. Cole, I think there are 3 points of appeal, and I guess Mr. Mercury is going to be dealing with the liability and class section.
Yeah, I think we're agreed on liability and class. It's presently school tax exempt, so that will not be an issue today.
Okay.
All right. Reason why you're here then?
I'm here.
Any questions? Okay. Any panel members, any questions? No. Okay. So we're going to be talking quantum. All right. So the floor is yours, Mr. Cole.
File number is 194620. Roll number is 0306142840. Civic address is 2735 Pembina. The 2020 assessed value is for $3,254,000. I'll be making a recommendation down to $2,856,000, and that's based on a change from an OFS property head class to an OFM.
Mr. Cole, can you give us that figure again? $2,860,000.
I have it for you.
Okay. Okay.
So if you look at page number 4, if you look up at the top, the income stream, we originally have it classified as OFS. It's not. It's an office medical. Not sure what happened there. After review, it's clear.
Hang on a second, Mr. Cole, because I'm not sure.
Page 4.
Page 4. All right. All right. Sorry.
If you turn to the last page, after review, I changed the property type class to an OFM and we ran standard parameters. This is the actual workup that we'll be using here today. So it's a correction. With an OFM, for the 12,670 square feet, we have a model rate of $18.52 a square foot, which produces a potential rent of $233,482. With our 5.5% standard vacancy, gives us an effective gross income of $220,640. Expenses are at 2% for non-recoverable, shortfall at $7, which produces a net operating income of $211,373. Capped at 7.4%, which gives us our $2,856,000. So, it was an error. I'm not sure how much. I'm not sure if it had to do with when we were changing everything over from to 40S. Maybe there was just a mistake on our part, but it's corrected. So then I went to check those standard parameters to see what the marketplace would be. That, you know what? Let's start on page 8. Is the subject property. The area of the subject property is on Pembina. So it's a Winnipeg Regional Health Occupied Property. It's used as office medical. If you look on page 10, that's the layout of the property. The layout of the property is next to the IE on page 11. They don't fill out the IE, but they do put a rental in. From that point in time, or just from that point, we'll move forward. Page 14, which I've blown this up a little bit just because it's unreadable at such a small scale. So just kind of one side of the page, on the other side of the page, in two segments. And on the page 16, they're indicating they're paying $18.75 net rent. So,
I'm just sorry to interrupt, but I've just spoken to Mr. Neufeld, and we can confirm that taxpayers in agreement with the recommendation that save us some time.
Should still go through the argument.
It's up to you.
I'll go through it quickly.
Okay.
So you look at page 3, is all the principal occupied spaces for Winnipeg Regional Health. For 484,000 square feet of inventory and a median CRU of 16,755 square feet. They have an average rent net of $18.29, weighted average of $18.96, and a median of $18.80. So as those numbers are very close, you can indicate it's a very good analysis. It's a tight range. Below that is our office medical related comparables in the marketplace, all on Pembina. Again, 25,000 square feet, 25,343 square feet of inventory. Median CRU is going to be smaller as there's smaller private offices, 2,077 square feet. Average rent is $20.44. Weighted average is $20.35, and a median is $20. So again, very tight analysis, very tight range. From that point, when we have an $18.52 rent, which is on the last page, that's well supported by a marketplace analysis, both for Winnipeg Regional Health Occupied Space and private office medical related CRUs. The standard parameters applied, which gets us back to our recommendation. So our recommendation is for $2,856,000, and that's simply based on a correction to the property type costs.
Mr. Neufeld, in agreement?
Yeah, just one or two brief questions.
Sure.
On page 11, looks like a sticker or something on the page.
See statement of earnings?
Yeah, who put that on? Is that the way it came?
I'm not sure who put that on.
And I'm looking, there is no statement of earnings here. I see rent roll. Is there another page missing on this, like a income and expense statement?
Possibly, I'm not sure. I simply brought in what they're showing. There's two tenants. Really one tenant, Addison Group there, but
I was just looking for the statement, that's all. So it does say there should be one on page 11.
if it's there, I would have brought it in. It might be there. It was after reviewing the property, it didn't seem like anything. So if it's there,
So there's nothing here. There's rent rolls and some blown up areas of rent rolls. That's
the format which we get it in on a PDF file doesn't allow for us to see what it is. I have to blow up what's there. It's not a digital copy.
No, that's
it's
fine,
an image
but
copy.
I was just looking for the statement of earnings, so you didn't provide it then. Okay. That's all I wanted to ask.
Thank you. Any questions?
No question.
Good. Ed? No? Great. Mr. Mercury, do you have any other business here?
There's one other matter on the dock, that would be the Aaron Street property, but I believe that's a different assessor, if I'm not
Okay.
mistaken. So if she's,
Okay.
is that Tricia?
Tricia.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
so
Trish.
we just proceed until she arrives, I suppose.
Okay. So,
What other
Malthus
properties
or
do you
with-
have?
With
All the others.
Malthus or Colliers?
807 Aaron?
yeah,
Yeah, well, then we have Lorimer or...
let's go to Lorimer, okay?
We covered 4 and 5, haven't
Pardon me?
we? We covered 4 and...
No, it's a different
Okay.
group.
Got it. So we're doing
We'll go to Lorimer, which is number 2. I know, I have to find them. Okay.
tonight because our secretary puts everything in the
That's right.
Good.
Mr. Poole, whenever you're ready, you can take us through this property.
File number is 19-311. Roll number is 100064645000. 1020 Lerner. Roll number, or I should say, set for the 2020 year. Assessed value is $17,209,000. The property is built in 2012. Has a leasable area of 67,592 square feet. I believe there is indoor parking, but we did not assign any rent to the indoor parking. On page 9 is the photos of the property, an aerial photo of the property. It's on Sterling Park Way. So if I just open page 10 and 11, it's 5 stories. And there's just some photos of the interior property as well. Page 12, page 13, Western Surgery Group, page 15. Orthodontic surgeon in there as well. This is straight from their website. Page 18 and 19. Well, so you get a good feel for the property. Dining is on page 22, starting at 22. Page 23. Page 25 is the rent roll. The rent roll they indicate ranges from roughly $18 a square foot up until $26 a square foot. They're highlighted in yellow for your convenience. Page 26. The total occupied square foot area of the building is a little over 59,000 with a vacancy of approximately 8,300 square feet. They are approximately 87.5% occupied. Then there is also attachment back to the island as well. There's an advertising on page 33. Your advertising lease rate at the reference date of $22 a square foot. And on page 34 indicates the CRUs that are available on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floors, all at $22 a square foot. And then just space from Creshman Miller for the spaces that are in place, so for each of those CRUs. So when we look at the actual comparable list, that's on page 3. We have 37 CRUs that we're looking at, 39,000 square feet, approximately, a median CRU of 1,553 square feet. Average is $21.44 a square foot. Weighted average is $20.91 a square foot with a median of 22. Highlighted in yellow is the subject property. For ease of simplicity, it's segregated out. We did the analysis on the next page. So with those comparables that are internal on the actual subject property taken out, we have square foot area of 61,120 square feet. Median CRU approximately the same. An average of $21.50 a square foot, a weighted average of $21.13 a square foot, and a median of $21.25 a square foot. So as you can see, the subject property is performing equally well with the marketplace. On the next page is the actual workup. 57,592 square feet. We have an average model rent of $20.78, which produces a potential gross income of $1,403,174. Our standard parameters apply. Vacancy at 5.5%. Gives an effective gross income of $1,325,999. And our expenses at 2%, our shortfall at $7. Gives us a net operating income of $1,273,480. Our overall capitalization rate is 7.4%, and that produces a value of $17,209,189, rounded to $17,209,000. So, one other thing I'll touch on is and I'm sure the panel's heard this numerous times before, so I'll go over it quick, is our 2020 Board Revision Addendum information for non-recoverable information. You see the cap rates there on page 2, indicating that there is a lowering of capitalization rates for the marketplace, regardless of property type class that you occupy. On page 3 is the non-recoverable expense sampling. These are 29 comparables that were supplied by Altus. 31 was in total. 3 of them we couldn't make anything out on, and we revert, applying the proper assessment methodology and municipal board case law to come up with an average of 1.06% for non-recoverable expenses as a percentage of effective gross income. We're giving 2%. With that being said, I'm open to questions.
I thank you. Mr. Newfield?
Yes. Page 5. Was this all from the model?
Yes, it was.
And no overrides here?
No overrides, no.
And the rent comparables, who selected these?
I selected it.
The 2 pages of rent comparables?
Yes, I did.
Did you have a chance to review, I heard you mentioning the subject's statements? I'm looking particularly on page 25 and 26. As of this particular mailer, correct that the vacancy rate was 12.41%? As stated on page 26.
Page 26, percentage occupied, 87.59%. Flip it the other way, yeah, about 12% the other way.
Vacancy about 12.4, okay. And in the past years on this property, has not the city and the taxpayer, for that matter, agreed on a higher than typical vacancy rate?
I believe I had this under POV prior. You asked for a 25% vacancy, which is approaching chronic. I indicated that there's a difference between a startup vacancy and chronic vacancy. I believe we met, I was offered 15 and you said 20. I'm recalling off the top of my head.
That's correct. So there has been a history of, as a matter of fact, I am looking at last year's brief, and it was 14% presented by the city in 2000 for the 2018 roll.
I'll trust your reading of the brief. I don't have it here, but I remember recommending an elevated vacancy.
Right. Okay. So there has been a history not only of vacancy, but of a recognition of that in the previous year's assessments. So what's changed this year?
Pardon me?
What's changed this year?
There's no longer startup vacancy.
Is there still vacancy?
There's approximately 12% of vacancy. That's nothing for a building that come online to fill up, and now you're approaching market, so you should be back at market for vacancy. You wouldn't expect for this building to be over a 10-year horizon to keep the 25% vacancy, which you're asking prior, nor the 20 or a 12% vacancy now. You would expect that you'd have a few more COUs and stuff, and you'd be back to a marketplace vacancy.
Did you check the the units that were vacant, whether or not they were the same units this
I-
year versus last year?
No, I did not. I see 3 vacant units. 4 vacant units, I should say.
Well, I have from last year, unit 404, vacant since entry, and on your page, it's still vacant. So that's not startup?
Startup vacancy is different between long-term vacancy. I wouldn't expect that at a 12% rate, that vacancy would be 12% over a near horizon or, I say, a 10-year horizon. So I'm not going to be recommending anything other than...
Well, unit 212 and unit 304, which are listed here as vacant, were listed as vacant 2 years ago, vacant since entry. So we have 3 units that have been vacant since the property was built. So in your mind, that's not a chronic vacancy problem?
No, not at all. It's a newer building. It's a very, very good building. I've been in it. I've been a patient in it. This isn't a building that I would expect to have anything more than marketplace vacancy.
Well, then how do you account for it? We have since the building has been built, now going on.
Has the vacancy trended downward since it's been built?
Now we're going on 7 years, and we still have a vacancy.
Has the
on
vacancy
units.
dropped every year since it's been built?
I'm asking questions. We
There's
now
the trend that
have,
I'm looking at.
for 7 years, but the trend, in order to meet that, wouldn't it have to actually meet market? It still hasn't met market.
They're getting market rents. The trend of vacancy is declining. They have amenity for the building, which has underground parking that we're not assessing for, which would be a heavy factor for as far as a tenant coming into the building, given the nature of the building. I don't see how this could be anything argued other than it's coming back to market, and you wouldn't expect that this 12% to continue for the next, say, 10 years. So an investor, as far as investor purchasing this property, wouldn't be expecting a 12% vacancy to continue on. Nor would they expect 20 or 25%, which was the numbers that were being
So
tossed out at the last.
your opinion is going to surpass the fact.
My opinion is what I'm recommending.
Okay. Now, you mentioned something about parking. You did have a chance to review the statements and the rent rolls. And did you have an opportunity to compare your projected rent on page 5 to the actual performance?
And which page are you referring to?
Well, that would be a reading of page 26, total rent for all units, 1.2 million, and you're at 1,400,000.
Yeah. We take off vacancy after that.
Okay, so whatever way you want to look at it.
No, we're taking it on a feasible basis. We don't do a contract rent.
No, that's not my question.
Marketplace indicated
Is,
what we're putting in is at market.
do you see any income for parking?
No. That's why we don't have anything assessed for parking.
Do you know why there is no income for parking?
We simply didn't assess for it. We didn't see any parking.
No. I don't care what you assess for. I'm asking, do you know why there's no parking income in the statement?
I can't tell you that. I didn't
Okay.
fill out the statement.
Now, in terms of the non-recoverables, have you calculated the non-recoverables for this property?
We're doing marketplace, non-recoverables.
That's not the question.
Again, we don't do contract.
On page 30, well, sorry, let's just back this up then again. On your-
I'm doing a complete fee simple analysis with marketplace parameters for rent, marketplace parameters for
right, so that's-
vacancy, marketplace parameters for
Back the
non-recoverables.
question up. Your discussion of non-recoverables, which is on, sorry, I don't have a page number on it.
Starting at page 30, after page 36, 4 or 5 pages.
I don't have anything past 36.
Stable to the brief. I believe everyone has it.
I guess I never got it. I don't have a handout. I end at 36.
It's the same standard brief that we've been, the addenda that we've been.
Right, well, I'm not objecting to it, I'm just saying I don't have it.
So They're all photocopied.
It
at the
was
same time.
on there, I can see the staple on the copy.
Yeah, well, maybe something I don't have that. So in this analysis here, page 3 of the edition, it says that for the general assessment, they analyze income and expense information reported by property owners to derive model-generated estimates. Now, was this one of the properties that you would have reviewed?
I can't comment on the actual modeling part of it. I didn't do the model. As far as would they have included it, I would assume it could be in there. But like I said, I don't do cap rate modeling. I don't do rent rate modeling, vacancy modeling. Those are for the modelers. I simply review what the model put in and see if it makes sense.
So academically, you're assuming this is a net rent building, did you have an opportunity to review how much the non-recoverables were in here then?
I took a brief look at them, but as far as analysis,
Page 30.
I'm doing straight fee
Okay,
simple.
just I'm referring you to page 30, so you didn't look
Yeah,
at
but
this?
Mr. Neufeld,
I don't know how many
they're
times-
they're not doing anything for recoverables, so I don't know where you're going here. Thank you.
All right, he just said no, but you beat him to the punch. I was moving on.
Okay.
Now, in your presentation, I heard you discuss a chart on the bottom of page 3 of your attachment, and you mentioned that this was, if I heard this correctly, a review of something Altus had provided.
Correct.
Now, was Altus involved in helping create the model?
I don't even check the modeler for that. I can say no to that.
Okay. So, if it's, why is it here then? It's not to support the model since it didn't go into the making of it, is it?
It's the only agency, tax agency, that provided the comparables that we actually asked for, the actual index that constant the non-recoverable studies, and we applied what we think is the correct position for non-recoverables. We asked Stevenson, we've asked Colliers, and we've asked Mark Newman for Phil O'Reilly. Neither one of those parties presented any indexes for us to review. This is the only, and again, there was 33, I believe, or 32 comparables, 3 of which were undeterminable because they had off-site information, off-roll information they couldn't make anything on. But these are the best 29 comparables that all the tax agents have provided, and we reviewed it, and after our opinion of how to interpret case law from the municipal board, it came to 1.06%.
So, but getting back to my question, this wasn't prepared for you for creation of the model, nor did you receive it until several months after the model was released, is that correct?
Correct. It was submitted based on evidence in the initial start of the site.
So shouldn't this be reserved for refuting Altus? Why are we seeing it today?
Because we did a study on these 29 properties and we can include it as our evidence, which is happens to be the only tax agency that actually provided their indexes. It's direct evidence argument.
Your capitalization rates on page 7, you just confirm that these, oh sorry, that was the table. I was looking for your summary capitalization rates.
Page 7. There is no
Page
order.
2 of your handout, just confirm that these are not being used to be comparable specific to the subject property, is that correct?
No, these were generally just the comparisons of different type of property classes that show that capitalization rates are trending downward and remain relatively low over the last little while.
Have you inspected this property for the purposes of taxation?
Not for the purposes of taxation, only as a patient. We go there, we see if people.
Now, are you familiar with the rental structure of the property in terms of the focus of the leases on who they're targeting?
The only information I have is what was submitted on the INE. So if there's any internal documentation, I would not have that.
Well, you're classifying as a medical building, correct?
I believe it's being used as a medical building.
But that
Designed as a
wasn't
medical building.
That wasn't based on any restriction uses that you're aware of?
No, that's based on the use, the design.
And in the cases of the rents that are attached here on page 3 and 4, I'm just a little confused here. Have some of these been duplicated?
No, as you can see, the unit numbers on each one.
Well, I'm just looking, for example, at random. I looked at comp 21. It's the same on both pages.
I removed the subject property at 2020 Larmere.
Oh,
the first page, and tested it against the marketplace again. And as I went over it, and as I pointed out to the panel and yourself, that the numbers virtually are identical. So that means that Larmere is performing at the marketplace. So there's not like a big jump in rent or a big dip in rent. It's the same. So it's achieving marketplace. The subject property the same as outside of it.
Are any of these properties multi-story with the exception of 400 Taché?
No, most medical office buildings are single story. I believe 1550 St. Mary's is. But pretty much most of them are going to be your single walk-up CRUs.
1555 meaning being a 2-story,
Yeah.
and 400 Taché being a 4-story across from the hospital, correct?
Yeah, obviously, yes.
Is there a benefit to co-location near a hospital for a medical office?
There obviously would be a pool of referrals from a hospital, but as you can see, it's not one single. Taché shows up 1, 2, 3 times out of 37. So
The pictures on your brief, page 15, show a few medical procedure rooms. Did you take these pictures?
no, this is straight off their website. It's public information.
Okay. And so there's a degree of surgery going on in this, I take it?
Yes, on the main floor there's Western Surgery Center.
And do any of your comparables perform on-site surgery?
Well, there are some oral surgeons, but I mean, as far as the nature of what Western Surgery Group offers, I would say a little less than that, obviously, because it'd be due to the nature of the doctor or the surgery.
Right. Can you identify any on here that are doing surgery on patients?
My point, if I can answer it properly, you would have more utility in Western Surgery because you'd be able to have different type of procedures.
Wasn't the question. I was simply asking, are there any others on here that perform on-site surgery?
2405 Main Street, comparable 877 Waverly. Those would both be Oral Surgery Group of Winnipeg. Again, Oral Surgery Group of Winnipeg, it'd be less utility than what this subject that are comparable as far as Western Surgery can offer. And there's multiple different types of surgeries there.
Do the surgeries offered on the subject property, are they insured services, or are they paid for payable services?
When I went there, they were through our City of Winnipeg plan.
So that's a private fund,
Yeah,
correct?
no, it would be private, I believe. I don't think there would be any public. From my perception of being in the office place, it did look like it was all private.
And on your page 7, which row would this come from for your capitalization rate?
We don't have on-office medical capitalization rate for the study.
So, but then it comes out of the office then in some ways? Is it derived from office, or is it?
You would look between an office and a retail use for this location, or I should say an office use for this location. In theory, you could have a retail use for this location.
Okay, and do you know how many, if there were any that on this study that were actually medical offices performing surgeries?
Again, I didn't do the capitalization of the study.
Thank you, those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. McFadden.
I have no further questions for you.
Mr. Sawatsky?
Couple of things. You say you visited the site as a person that's made use of the services.
Yeah.
So you might appreciate the parking situation there.
No, for client-based services, you've got work outside. The underground is, I assume, for owners.
But I'm talking about outside parking.
Yeah, there's on-site parking.
Are there any uses in the building that have large clients that are not medical offices?
If I'm not mistaken, there is, second here. Sun Life Insurance Company, but I would assume that could be related to office insurance, but no actual patient services.
Is there like a physical fitness center in that building?
There's physiotherapy.
Yeah.
You could read through it. It's good utility for the building. It's a newer building built into the building.
Yeah. Do you know whether in building the building they met their parking requirements under the city of Winnipeg regulations?
As far as I'm aware, I think, if I'm not mistaken, from the last, I can't remember if it was the last hearing or the last person I talked to who dealt with this property. No, sorry, it was the actual oral surgeon that I saw. He said it was originally supposed to be a 3-story building, he built another 2. But as far as the parking on site, it seems ample to me. You got to also look at the underground parking too. So,
okay. Back to the question of the vacancy rate. You said last year it was at 14%, and you said it was because it was a fairly new building and it was in transition to what, a market?
the last time I had it, there was startup vacancy, and I looked at it and went, there's got to be some absorption for a type of property like this, and if you were to be purchasing this type of property, that would affect your purchasing, because you know there'd be a period of vacancy as it trends down to marketplace vacancy, and that's why I made the recommendation for a bit of an elevated vacancy. I believe we rested at 20%, if I remember the order correctly.
Does your department have a standard on what the vacancy rate is, or how long that initial period is for?
Well, I looked at it under review, the site that we're performing, and I saw a significant dropping of vacancy, and I saw a marketplace that's being maintained for rent. When you have those two factors at play, you can see that the marketplace is getting to the point where it's stable in the marketplace. If you saw a lessening of rental rate because they couldn't get the tenancies in place, then there's an argument to be made where we should make some adjustments. But as you can see from the subject property versus market, they're achieving market. So the vacancy is actually declining back to market too. All things at play, our market approach seems appropriate.
Thank you. No further questions.
I have no questions. Mr. Newfield, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So the building was purpose-built for a medical usage facility. The primary drivers were behind it were a series of doctors, some who are currently tenants in there. The concept was to have a more in-depth medical clinic to do day surgeries and other things. The project started extremely slowly. They found out a couple of problems in the beginning. When it was first built, there was only one elevator shaft that gave them a bit of a problem servicing the upper levels, and they did put in the second shaft. There was a plan for it. And parking was a problem. They did make arrangements with the neighbor A&S Homes, who sold them the land originally, for some overflow parking. It is there, it is available, and generally the staff should be aware of it and aren't parked there, but it's been crowded. They're meeting the bylaw for the parking requirement for what they do, but they're not meeting their person demand, which means they under-projected their parking. It's a lot like Costco. You know, if you ever try to park at Costco, they're meeting code, but they're not meeting their customers, and that's a problem. And one of the biggest reasons why is that it's a labor-intensive building with a day surgery, so there'll be a lot more people, a lot more density in the building, typical office is 1 per 750, one person per 750, but in a typical day off procedure, the density far exceeds it, and that's what's been their problem. The underground parking is offered free as an incentive to rent in the property, and so they're not collecting income on it. They had been dreams in the beginning of doing this, and incidentally, I'm speaking from first-hand knowledge. I did the original appraisal on the development of this property many, many years ago. Absorption was planned, hoped for a lot quicker than this, and it is not absorbing. Two major reasons are the lack of users in a medical building, and I advised them of this years ago. I said, you're trying to lure doctors in here, and that's fine, but your typical doctor has a lease somewhere else, and it's 5 to 10 years. You have to use a 10-year absorption window in order to fill up, because they have to get out of their lease and they have to move over here. And that's their biggest problem, is that absorption window. And we're still only on at the time of the reference date, we were only in year 6. Today we're only in year 7. So we still have 3 more years before we can even dream of hitting market. That was a mistake on their part, a misunderstanding that they thought they'd fill up sooner. I did advise them differently, but they still built it anyway. The other problem was the structural side of it, and as they built it, with a structural steel building, they had a few costs that they hadn't counted on, so if anyone has been in there can see the braces. They weren't supposed to be part of the original element. And along the way, the engineer advised them that they had to brace the building. It's not a major issue, but it was the style and design. They wanted a lot more clear span. They do have a central hallway, but they wanted each side to have clear span, and in doing so, you have fewer posts in the middle, which means that your wall structure has to perform more of the structural. So you can see the stays. I don't know if you can see many of the pictures that either party has provided. No, you can't. Yes, yes. On the assessor's page 14, the bottom picture, that's one of the stays that's in the window for stability. Not exactly what you're hoping to look for in a first-class building, to see this structural support in the inside, kind of as an afterthought. The actual income being generated in this property has been submitted in statements by both parties, and it is approximately $1.1 million, and that is because there's a vacancy. And what we did, and the 1.1 is based on a reading of the statement, and it includes all the costs listed except for a shortfall cost, which we did not include, because some of those are shortfalls. So we ended up with, what we did is we estimated it as full with the same rents, so that the math calculation is the bottom left-hand corner. So the revenue at 1.9, we increased it to 2.1, and that's gross revenue, by the way, just upping it by the 12.4% factor. That works out to a net of 1,327, then resubtracting the actual vacancy, and which is 12.4%. So that is not some sort of market indication. That's on original absorption and the style of project. And even if this building had been in place for 20 years, a vacancy is still a vacancy. The market evidence on this is extensive. We're not going to ignore it away because we don't believe in it. It's a problem, and the future has to deal with it. Then the non-recoverables we're estimating at $58,000, and you do have all the statements to see the non-recoverables. Structural reserve, we're using 25 cents a foot. Now in this case, the structural reserve is going to be for issues related to windows, roof, and basement. And why basement is because with indoor parking, you're dealing with temperature changes. Now there's a very modern air handling equipment in the basement, but cars that drive into the basement, especially at this time of year, to drag in the chemicals from the road, which erode the parging and the cement. So that's considered in a structural reserve because you can't recover that from your tenants. That's a building cost. So the structural reserve is on the basis that every 20 to 40 years you're going to have to spend a lot of money to fix the building. Reasonable. Our shortfall is calculated from the actual shortfall rate based on the statement, so the exception are utilities, which would use the city's rack rate of $235, and that's simply because this property likely generates higher utilities than most, so we wouldn't use the actuals because a lot of utilities are using their processes. So that's $10.22 a square foot. Now the highest component of that, of course, are the taxes. One can't ignore the taxes in any shortfall costs, but they alone are almost $5. So the $7 rate is not appropriate. Use actual. That leaves us with an NOI of $1,002,000, and the difference to their statement is based on the shortfall risks and the non-recoverables. Now we've capped at 7.5, which is very similar to the assessor's 7.4, and the reason I know is I really rarely venture below 8%, but the reason we could do this is because we've already addressed the risk in the vacancy. You've got to address the risk. You do it in vacancy or you do it in cap. And we have a risk. We have a special use building that has underperformed for 6 years, and we anticipate 4 more years on this basis, and at that time we can see what it will stabilize at. That's my presentation. I do have, I should have said this earlier, for the record I have some rebuttal information. We've heard it all before, so I won't read through it, but I do want it to be placed on the record.
You're rebutting what?
This is the assessment department on cap rates and non-recoverable costs.
Okay.
And I need one for every file, right? So, 5, I think I did this, 7, 8. Oh, I got one left over for Tricia. Thank you.
Mr. Paul, any comments?
I will, but I need a moment.
Okay.
Can you turn to your page, starting at your page 6?
Yeah, we just
It is brief. It was actual brief. I'll get to the rebuttal. Because hasn't been presented, it's not for me to rebut, but I'll get to it. I've seen it before.
Okay.
So maybe turn to the Phillips brief on page 6 on the Phillips brief.
Page 6.
Yeah, page 6. You're using the June 2018 office space inventory head lease information followed on page 7 and 8. That would be post-referenced by 3 months?
No.
June 2018?
No, it's not post-reference.
April 1st, 2018?
It's not post-reference.
We're allowed to use anything up until April 1st, 2018. This is clearly June 2018.
No, it isn't.
Post-reference. I'd like the panel to put the appropriate weight on it. The panel's already indicated we don't look at things that are post-reference.
Okay, let's pretend you asked a question. It was published June 2018. It was brought to press in May of 2018. I phoned and discussed this with Mr. Johnson, Wayne Johnson, the author of this report. He gathered this information from prior periods and had it gathered by April 1st, 2008. The remaining time was the time sent to press.
Okay, I'll let the panel make its decision on that. The marketplace wouldn't have this information until it was post-reference, so the marketplace couldn't use this information.
No,
to determine
Marketplace
market
isn't
value.
using this information. He's gathering,
We'll make that decision.
he's gathering it from the market. This is the performance before April 2018.
On page 5, I see 4 comparables at 83 Sherbrooke. These are assuming all, you only have 2 indicated as chiropractic and medical. I'm assuming all 4 at Sherbrooke is office related, or I should say medical office related. Correct?
Yeah, we're not relying on Sherbrooke for this valuation.
Okay,
This
because
is
there
just
would only be about 5,500 square feet of inventory. If you're not relying on Sherbrooke, which is a substandard property compared to the subject, what is your rent that you're using to compare?
We're using the actual rent.
So you're doing a leasehold analysis, you're not doing a fee simple analysis.
No, the rents here indicate support in the marketplace for this property, and to a degree you're correct, because the lease fee is a fair bit higher than market would indicate.
You don't have a market comparison, a single one to compare to see, you can check what level of market is compared to the leasehold.
There's not a
basis.
single
So how do you know if it's
property,
performing at market?
there's not a single property like this on the market. So what we did is we looked at the market. These are what's available, and then judged that rather than rely on a typical rate, which would be maybe 12 to 15 a foot for suburban office, we looked at the paid rent as being higher, could possibly be lease fee, and we had the option of discounting it to market, but given the overall concept of the building, we felt that it was going to conform to market.
So just for clarity's sake for the panel and myself, you have no market evidence of rental rate in your brief?
No, we do. We have
For
the whole,
office medical
we have
related,
the whole
you have
page.
no office
No.
comparables. You already discounted 83 Sherbrooke, so you have no office or office medical related comparables.
There are numerous properties through here that are located in the general area that are of office use. And
Office medical is not office.
we are using those as a comparison to market and seeing where the subject lies in.
You indicated earlier that you, of course, the other appeal, but also this one, that you wanted to see all the information on the INEs. Can I ask you why on your submission of the INEs you have not submitted the INE in its entirety on page 3, 4? You've submitted a partial submission of the INE, but not a full submission.
INE meaning the questionnaire?
The questionnaire and the statement that was sent to us, you're demanding recently to see every single document that was sent to
Well-
us, yet you yourself don't submit them.
Page 3 is the statement of real estate earnings.
You can see the entirety of my brief.
Page
See your
4
two yours.
is the rent roll, and the additional pages had to do with the statements produced for notes to the financial statements on the accounting policy, the income tax information, the balance sheet, and the cover page. Now, those particular items, if you read through the studies in the Appraisal Institute, when we look at the numbers being generated from a property, we always assume that our statement of income and expenses are neutral of tax considerations, and the balance of the statement that was provided was done for submitting to CRA. So you can't take an individual situation, person's tax situation, his retained earnings, and expect that every property is the same. It's clear within the standards that that all things financial are deemed to be not part of the rental revenue and expenses.
Let me refine my question. From page 22 to page 32 on my brief, you have every single page that was submitted to the city. In past appeals, you're demanding to see every single document. Why is your valuation judgment differ and allow you to not include everything and yet question the assessor on when he elects not to bring in every single page?
Oh, because my evidence isn't produced to discredit other people. It's merely there to show what the income is.
So based on your judgment, you'll decide what to show the panel, but you won't allow the assessor the same.
The information that you're discussing is a cover letter, blank pages, and
Okay,
CRA
I'll let you read through.
Gentlemen, let's press on for, to more serious matter.
Well, this is a serious matter, Mr.
Well, yeah, I realize that, but let's get to the point,
Yeah,
okay?
I will be doing that now. So, can you please turn to this document here? Why is page number 5 in this brief?
What document do you have?
They're not related.
This, the brokerage? Brokerage, okay.
Why is page number 4 or 5 in this brief?
Because on these occasions, and another one which just occurred the other day, we've come across incidents of information being removed from line items on the rental income expense statements. And the assessor has put forth the reliability of his model, saying it's taken from statements. But in these incidents, several of them involve non-recoverable items which were deleted from a statement and then presented to this board. So there's a gap in there somewhere, and the taxpayer has the right to know why this is missing.
Okay, so your response now is different from your response the last time we had me and you sat in front of each other. Has any...
Sorry, is that a question?
That's a statement of fact.
No, well, okay.
I believe you...
Save your statements for argument.
You refer to it as assessor
You
count.
ask a question.
Gentlemen, please, can you confine it to questions and answers, okay?
So, please turn to page 8. As for the last, this is the same document that was submitted the last time it was appealed. I reviewed this document in full. On page 8, this is a assessment brief prepared by Nicholas Ruda for a 2014 appeal. Was going to be heard in 2017. It never was heard at the municipal board. As such, it's a non-public document, and it's been altered. Why is a non-public document that was never presented at appeal been altered and presented here today?
I'm going to ask the chairman to make me answer that question, if you don't mind. I have my reasons. I'm not trying to be tricky. It has to do with privacy. If you order me to answer it, I will. If you don't, I have a difficult time going past what's been presented here.
Now, there is so much data here for us to read. The unfortunate part is that we can be here all day or continue this, but I'd like to make it a short and respectful hearing on both parties. So it's not going there.
Mr. Chairman, I'm being very respectful. I'm asking direct questions on evidence that's being submitted.
So I think we can proceed that way, okay?
I would like the question answered.
Questions and answers, okay?
I asked the question, I'd like to be answered.
Okay. Proceed. Mr. Leville?
Are you requesting that answer now?
Yes, please.
Okay. That's all I really wanted to hear. Well, the concept of evidence being presented in other locales is when it's entered in evidence, it's not whether it's presented, it's been entered into evidence in a previous hearing. And when that happens, it does become part of the record that one can examine for other reasons or as a person wishes. It was voluntarily entered into evidence, and it's presented to me for my use.
Was this made public?
As it was presented to me for my use, and on the basis of being entered in the public. And my reading of the Evidence Act says that once something's been entered in a tribunal, especially voluntarily, it becomes the right of someone to use it. Now, out of respect for any considerations, the identifying information was removed. Now, I wouldn't normally answer the question on the identifying information unless the board makes me. They did. So yes, that's where it came from.
You're referring this to non-recoverable. This is part of your non-recoverable rebuttal, correct?
Well, no, it's part of the rebuttal, but the basis behind it is to show that on site-specific valuation, the assessment department seems to employ different policies. In this particular case, it had individualized shortfall, individualized management expense, description of non-recoverable costs. And my point in bringing it is that valuation procedures haven't changed in a century, and one party can't unilaterally change the rules that they themselves once embraced because they feel like it.
So to confirm, this was never at hearing, it was never a public document, it was submitted as part of the exchange, this hearing never took place. You redacted a 2014 information for a 2014 appeal that was presented in 2017 and altered the document.
No, that's your statement, and that's not what I said.
Can you please turn to your page 13 of this brief? I notice this is letters dated to Rose Gibbons, former secretary of the municipal board. It is also indicated to Todd Hewitt, John Carplick, Brent Ferguson, and the late Dave Saunders. This letter is dated November 29th, 2019. Those people do not work for here. Mr. Saunders has since passed on a number of years ago. Can you please explain how you have a November 2019 dated letter?
Never noticed that. I'm 100% certain that it wasn't dated November 2019, so I
Here's
don't...
the document's been altered.
Yes, that's true. It appears the date is incorrect. I shouldn't say that. I should go back and check the original, which I have in my possession, just to see what it says. It could have been a typo from the time.
So getting back to the original page 5, where you indicated when I was last at appeal that assessor's been tampering with evidence, that's your words. You see that you've been doing the same in your own submission.
Yeah, there's not even a world of difference between these two, because this letter was, we're having concern over the date. It's not over the factual information. There's nothing in this letter that turned on this case other than to show some background on it. In the case of the tampering with evidence, it was submitted to a hearing where the evidence before the board was that we looked at the statements from the income and expense mailers to make our non-recoverables. Yet at the same hearing, they had deleted line items from the information supplied for the appellant. Under threat of penalty, they had to supply them, and then they were altered. That's vastly different than this particular issue.
That's all the questions I have. I'll address the rest in the submittal, or information.
Messenger, questions?
So to go back to the brief, is that
You
where we are?
may go all over the place.
Thank you.
Was there not 3?
There's 2.
2.
Sorry, we've kind of moved around
Yes.
a lot here, and
Yes.
it's hard to keep a train of thought. So the issues, if I could just summarize, Mr. Neufeld, the issues that we're taking issue here with on this particular building are the rent that you submitted is lower,
Right.
the vacancy rate, which is higher,
Correct.
and the non-recoverables issue.
That's correct.
We're not worried about that cap rate.
No, it's a relatively minor issue.
And your rent is based on the actual rents that are being paid.
That's correct.
And where do you show that in your?
The actual rents are, the rent roll is on page 4, and then the statement of operations is on page 3. So what we had done with these is taken the income of 1909, which is at the top of page 3, which is a combination of recoveries and rents, and noted that there was a 12.4% vacancy. So take the 1909 and upcharged it by 12.4%, that's, it makes the income 2180. Do the same with the expenses, because as income goes up, expenses also rise, but by a lesser amount, and because some of the expenses were fixed and some of them were not, and calculated a potential net income.
Well, I'm trying to understand where the 1968 comes from. That's the figure that I'm trying to understand where it comes from.
Right.
It doesn't, I mean, if I look at the rents that are on this rental roll, which are very hard to read, they look like they're 21, 25, 22, 24, 30. Those are the rents.
Yeah, well, they were a little bit easier to read in the original formatting. The rent roll listed here, showing at the bottom here, is 1248 for the units without the units that have been rented. So we've adjusted that to 1327.
Okay, which then comes to the 1968.
The 1958, you got me lost here.
Okay.
Oh yeah, 1968 per square foot. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
just looking at the 1327.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, and the 12.4 vacancy is based on what the actual is right now.
The actual physical vacancy.
And
that's
your
correct.
belief is that that 12.4, it would continue into the future? That
Well,
a purchaser would be concerned
yeah,
about that 12.4?
The initial vacancy for the first year was targeted much better, and it ended up being, by the time the project started, it was around 46%, and by the time the project was complete, I think they were hitting close to 60% that they had signed up. And then absorption after that, for the next few years, was very spotty. And these are units that are brand new units that have still not been occupied. There's one non-medical user in there, and that's unit 210.
Okay.
It's a grain trader.
Okay. Again, the question was, you believe this will continue into the future, that is something that a purchaser would have to be concerned about?
Yes, it'll continue. As I said, we originally budgeted for them a 10-year absorption schedule when I did the original appraisal. So we had done it on a DCF basis, which was very typical for an investment building, to plot forward the absorption, and I think my predictions are dead on. It's just a question of where it'll stabilize at.
Okay. And then on your non-recoverables are based on actuals as well. Where do I see those?
Well, those would be, because we're dealing with a building that has vacancy problem, it does become a little difficult to calculate what's a non-recoverable and what's not. So on page 3, generally what we're looking at is the professional fees at $32,000, the office and miscellaneous at $5,400, and insurance, $2,000 on insurance. Yeah, that's not right. That's a good rate. I wish I could get that rate. Okay, and then you'll notice that there's a few fees in there. We didn't use amortization, and we didn't use long-term debt. So it would come from that page.
Okay, so the total, when you've got non-recoverables, your structural reserve, and your shortfall is $160,000, Mr. Michel.
So the non-recoverables, structure reserve, yeah, that's correct.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Swansky.
Do you think the situation with regards to the parking, the outdoor parking in this thing, and your vision or view that they've underestimated the number of people that come and visit the place? that that might be affecting and might mean that some potential clients may not come because of the parking?
Well, it'll affect some of their services where they're in steep competition with others. They've been attempting to attract some of the users. There's a pharmacy on site, for example, and they're not going to get pharmacy business. They're going to get the prescriptions that are written in the building, maybe. They stand a better chance of getting those, but they won't get any drive-bys on it, and that's been a problem with the pharmacy. I think they've replaced their pharmacy twice already. And I'm just trying to remember, there was one or two other tenants who are, it's a difficult question here. The lab service, so they do have an on-site lab, so they're not going to get, I live in the area, if I have to get my blood taken, I don't go there, so it'll affect that business.
So if they solve the parking problem, then their vacancy rate might go down? It's got to be a real circumstance.
Well, it'd help their income side on attracting, attracting a user who's not as sensitive to the parking. Also, there's the question of access as well, access and parking, but I don't know, if you go and drive in that area, I won't even wonder why anyone goes to Seasons Tuxedo. I can't even get into it, but this one's better, but maybe people don't care about access. But the parking, every time I've been there, it's been a difficult grind. As I said, A&S did volunteer some spaces next door while they had space, and they've been up and down.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Summation, Mr. Paul?
Yes, just start on a few major points. If you're going to determine an increase in vacancy, you should be determining if there's a barrier to marketplace vacancy. In every single municipal board that I've reviewed, there has to be a determination which would create a barrier to achieving marketplace vacancy. I don't see this here at a new building. As far as parking, I've been there on 5 times in the last 3 or so years. I've always found a spot, and it's been busy. It's always busy when I've been there. I don't see that being a barrier to it, as you can see from the tenancies that are the building and the rental rates that are achieved. In the appellant's brief, there's no market analysis to contrast against the contract. There is no determination in the appellant's brief what actual marketplace is for vacancy or for market or for shortfall. They're just using straight contract. As far as the post-reference information, June 2018 is post-reference. I'll leave it in the board's hands to make a decision on that. We are doing a fee simple marketplace analysis, and they are doing a lease fee place analysis. It's pretty clear that the municipal board and every single agent that I've reviewed at the municipal board indicates we do fee simple, not leasehold interest. As far as some of the documentation you've seen here today, there's been some altered documents by the appellant. I'm not sure why. I've questioned them. I'll leave it in your hands. And as far as missing income and expense information pages, I provided in full. I think we got an explanation, or sort of an explanation, as the appellant doesn't seem to feel that they can provide what they choose to provide when the assessor has to provide everything in full. So with that, I think our actual fee simple marketplace approach at $17,209,000 is reasonable. It's testing that market. As you can see from my page 3 and my page 4, the rental rates, when you remove the subject property from marketplace, is virtually identical. It's a good property. It's a good utility. It should be in the upper end of the range. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld?
The 3 issues under debate are rent, vacancy, and non-recoverables. Property has, at this point in time, a 7-year history, and the prehistory, as I indicated in my testimony, was happened before that, in terms of the planning stage. They were told years ago to anticipate a longer than typical absorption, and that is happening. They made some design mistakes. The elevator, the structural, both fixed, and the parking, which is still a detriment. The market-based issue is the concept that a doctor from somewhere else, professional, you know, a doctor who's doing, and I was asking these questions about what services are performed there for a reason, because those aren't offices. When a doctor moves in and he's actually doing treatment, he's got a lot of TIs invested in the space, and he likes to be there for them to mature. A TI is the cost of converting the property from 6 walls to a working space. So that's the 10-year window which they were advised on to do that, because if a doctor has space, even if he's ready to expire, he's got money tied up in his TIs and he wants to use it. So that's their problem. That's all market. Now the concept of fee simple and lease fee and leasehold estate, the property was a concept for Winnipeg. When I first sat down and met the parties behind it, Rennie and Brad, they were going into a new territory with this. It is superior to what's seen on the market. So if you wanted to stick to the concept of fee simple, we're actually looking at a lower rent on the basis of 6 walls. The idea is they could generate higher rents offering a product that's geared towards a specific user who would like to not only live in the area he works, but have the patients come to them in this area instead of having to go downtown. That's the concept. So going to the paid rent would generate a higher value than going to the fee simple of 6 bare walls in the neighborhood. And that's what we did show you. So the whole concept of this is rather wasted in the discussion, because we're using a rent that's higher than the fee simple. But we are acknowledging that they're embarking on a brand new style of fee simple, and this is what the number is. They're setting the stage for it. And the vacancy is well discussed, non-recoverables, you heard the stories many, many times. So lastly, I'll leave you with the fact that issues like, remember that what we're talking to you about here, please separate facts from arguments. Facts are simple. Vacancy has never been lower than 12%. Never. The last 3 cycles it's been brought in. Recommendations reducing the vacancy higher rate, because the assessment department has recognized it. The reason they're not doing it today, I can't speculate. But the point is, it didn't get better. So how can something that's not getting better in the last 2 years say, well, you got no more vacancy risk? It is what it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Newfield. We're going to take a 5-minute break. In the meantime, Tricia, you're going to be up here next.
I'm going to go next.
Yeah. And Mr. Mercury, you're going to be here with Mr. Newfield. And look, we'll take 5 minutes and we'll just organize everything. Okay, we'll call a meeting back to order, and we'll have Tricia signed in.
Please state your name. Do you affirm the evidence to present to you, the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you.
All right. So we're going to go to 807 Aaron Street. And whenever you're ready, you can take us through this property, but I understand there is a non-compliance issue, so we will talk about that first.
Okay. If you turn to page 11, I will read. Oh, sorry. Yeah, page 11, you'll see the brief was submitted, or the income and expense mailer was submitted on July the 10th. The income and expense mailer was sent out on April 12th, 2018, with a due date of May 3rd. A second certified mailer was then sent out on June the 8th, with a due date of June 29th. So submitting the mailer on July the 10th is well after the due date, and for that reason we were asking for non-cooperation.
Thank you. Mr. Mercury.
Mr. Chairman, just by way of objection, the assessor's given evidence that the mailer was sent on a certain date. That is actually not in evidence.
I see that.
So, just to confirm, Ms. Caldwell, there's no documentation in your brief that would verify when in fact the mailer was sent, is there?
No, but they're all sent on the same date.
Well, you're giving general evidence. We're looking for evidence specifically to this property. And not only the date that it was sent, but the date it was received by the owner. You don't have any documentary evidence as to that either, do you? Correct?
Right.
Okay. So you will note on page 8 of your brief, which is section... sorry, Mr. Chairman.
I think under the circumstances, Mr. Mercury, there is nothing in the brief, there's no evidence, so it will be denied.
Thank you.
Okay?
Those are my matters.
All right.
Good job. That was
All right. Thank you.
The board, yes,
Oh, is this, that's yours.
Mr. Sawatsky, are you okay with that?
in retrospect, yes.
So you can take us through the subject property?
Okay. The roll number is 13011253200. It's 807 Aaron Street. For the 2020 roll year, we have an assessed value of $976,000. I have a recommendation, but I have not presented to the applicant.
All right. Do you have a handout
I do.
for everybody?
Yes.
Okay. I thank you. Maybe you can take us through that,
Sure.
and we will.
The only thing that has changed in this workup is the rent. I'm just going to go through the property itself, and then I'll get to the recommendation. So this is a one-story building with an effective year of 1959. Wall height's 13 feet. It's zoned M1 and has a land to plan area of 1.40. It's owner occupied. Page 3, you can see some exterior photos of the property. And on page 4, there is an aerial view of the property. And if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, there's a small piece of the property, a little rectangular section that juts out towards the road. This is unheated storage. So on page 6, I have my income workup. So our table rent for this property was an overall value of $5.88. And my recommendation is to reduce that rent to $5.06.
And you've come down to 812,000.
812,000, that's correct.
Mr. Neufeld?
Yeah, I wish I would have been aware of this because I have to check with the owner on this. I how about if I just tell you for now, we'll confirm it, and I'll get back to you, and appeal it if we don't like it, is that fair?
Okay.
Okay. Linda, any questions?
No, I have no questions.
Mr. Sawatsky?
No questions.
All right. I think you have one more, Mr. Duffield?
One more, yes.
So, any summation, either party? I don't think.
Nothing.
Okay. Yes, I think that's it.
Such a fast 15 minutes. or-
Hi.
Just tell me about that before then you want to spend time with us.
You'll never have to do it again. There you go.
So we'll go to Ellis, 606 Ellis. Mr. Fall, whenever you're ready.
File number is 194492. Roll number is 1305010900. Address is 606 Ellis Avenue. The 2020 assessed value is for $572,000. The building was built in 1920. We have an effective year of 1952. We have a leasable area of 3,525 square feet. If you turn to my page 8, the subject property, indicating that's on Ellis. So the I&E for the property is on page 10. This is an electronically submitted I&E, so I have a printout of what the appellant, or I should say what the owner submitted. They check off owner occupied. They fill in all their appropriate expense-related information. They indicate on page 11, it's an Ellis Dental Group. They are, again, owner occupied in the areas that they occupy. So, what I did was look for lower grade comparables. Most of these properties are owner occupied. Typically, as the subject property is. So to find a lease that's appropriate and comparable was a bit of a difficult task. That's why the comparables stretch a little towards the north end and over the river kind of thing. I'm looking for older buildings that are being leased out for office or medical office related uses. So on comparables 1 through 6, we have 2 on Ellis. We have rental rates of $17 and $21 net. We have $700 Portage. It's a dental clinic. The other 2 are medical clinics for $14.50. We have one at 759 Henderson Medical Clinic at $16. We have Salter. They're leased out at $21.60 and 1671 Main Street. They're a month-to-month lease, $28 net. Again, higher month-to-month, a little off of what market should be, obviously, but they are month-to-month, and that's what we're reporting. These properties range from built in 1935 up until 1985. They're of a similar use, similar nature, a little bit substandard from what you would expect, but given their locations, comparable as far as terms of use, building age, the subject property. So for the average rent, we have $19.68, weighted average of $18.03, and median of $19. What our model predicted was for the 2,325 square feet, $15.82, And for the storage area, 1,200 square feet in the basement, we have $9.94. That produces a value, or I should say, potential gross income of $40,710. With our standard parameters applied, 5.5%, gives an effective gross income of $47,031. 2% for non-recoverable, shortfall at $7, gives us a net operating income of $43,753. Capped at a little bit higher capitalization rate at 7.65%, gives us a capitalized value rounded to $572,000. We've already been over the non-recoverable and the capitalization rate issued submission addenda on page, starting at page 12 through to 17. So with that, it's a pretty simple workup. With that, I'm open to questions.
I thank you. Mr. Neufeld, questions?
That's the evaluation page 4 and 5. Was this done by the model?
Yes, it was.
Were there any overrides changes?
No.
So just to understand this, page 4, the 1,200 square feet is basement space,
Yes.
and the 2,325 square feet is
Floor.
500 on the upper level and 1,825 on the main? Is that how it works? Did you provide any basement rents?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Did you provide any basement rents?
No, I did not.
Have you been in the property?
No, I have not.
How high is the basement? Do you know? Do you have it in your records?
I haven't been in the property. We have it recorded as storage, so it wouldn't be, different basements have different elevations.
Okay, so storage rents at $10 a square foot, don't you think that's a bit excessive?
Given the metal use nature of the property, not in particular, until I actually see the subject property. As far as if it's substandard basement, there could be an allowance made down to 5.
Is the basement demised separately?
I don't believe so, no.
So it can't be rented on its own?
No.
How did this building begin its life? Was it a house?
It was a house, from my understanding.
And how did it change from 1920 age to 1952?
It was converted over to office medical use. As far as the permit that related to it, I did not bring that in, as it was quite an old permit. I didn't find it.
When was the addition built on the back?
I don't have that information. It may have been 1952, I'm not sure.
Have you, or paid rents on page 3, did you select these?
Yes, I did.
And did you, where did you get the information from?
Yeah, I needs that were submitted.
So this was from the column marked income that these numbers were taken from?
Correct.
Was there a verification on the income to determine if there were rents were gross or semi-gross in any way?
All of these were indicated to be net. I reviewed all of them. That's why I also indicated the month-to-month rent would be obviously a little higher, given that's month-to-month.
You're saying from the mailer, and I'm speaking, my question is very specific. Did you review, and for a sample on your page 10, did you review annual income receipt column against annual expenses on the column to determine that these were net, or did you just look at the check box?
I looked at what the authorized signature indicated was net, and that's what we used.
This is property.
I also look for substandard properties to be reflective of the subject property.
On what row on page 6 does the capitalization rate come from?
Again, we've already went over this. We don't have any capitalization rate information for office medical.
So does it come out of office?
It could be just a general capitalization rate between office. It could also be converted to retail, substandard retail. Either one, office or office medical, or retail for a building such as this, it could be converted, either of those three.
Now, you're using the income approach. Does that mean that you're deeming this property, to be an investment property?
As far as would it rent out?
As an investor, is it an investment property?
Investment property could be, but it is a low-grade investment property, as we have reflected of the rents, and we have reflected of the increase in capitalization rate that we use.
On site, there are, I'm looking at your picture, page 8, how many parking stalls?
I believe there is 2 there, maybe possibly 3, no more than that.
And based on the bylaw, parking bylaw, what would be the requirement?
I didn't look into that. There are a lot of buildings that have less than what the bylaw indicates. There's still a current use and in place.
Sure, I understand that, but
That's hypothetical.
I'm asking as this relates to compliance with the bylaw. Do you know which that would be, whether
It would obviously have less than would be required.
Okay, so likely a current legal non-conforming use?
That's pretty much what I just said, yes.
Well, there's a term for it. I just
Yeah,
wanna make
legal
sure.
non-conforming use, yes.
Okay. Those are my questions.
All right, thank you. Linda?
I don't have any further questions.
Okay. Mr. Sawatsky?
I have no questions.
Just a couple. I guess on the front sheet it shows 1825 main floor.
Yeah.
Okay, it's
Which were you?
on yours, I think. Is it?
Yeah, 8 plan area.
Oh, I'm sorry.
1825 main floor.
Okay, yeah. So, why the difference? Was there an addition on the back?
Well, you can see,
Okay.
you can see on the side.
Yeah, okay. So that's part of the addition. The 1,200 square feet is in the basement?
Correct.
Okay. And what, is it just storage in there, or do you know?
Well, they put down category, if you look at the primary use, number 4, medical nursing, but they also put down to the upper floor as well. I'm assuming that it's pretty safe bet that no clientele goes into the basement. I'm making an assumption there that it would be pretty much a storage rate.
And model driven in regards to the cap rate?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have it recorded as a below average investment quality. As you can indicate, as we see in the capitalization rate, I've got about a half-point increase. And then if you look at the rental information from the other marketplace that I brought in, for the other OFMs, they were hovering around $20, $21. This is at $15.82. So, and when we cross-reference it against the few ones that are on page 3 that are leased out, even though the places are still getting a higher rent. But having said that, it's quite difficult to find properties that aren't owner-occupied. They simply almost all are owner-occupied.
And that cap rate takes into consideration location? I thank you. Mr. Goodfield, the floor is yours.
Thank you. First, I think we've been through the rebuttal information, but because I get a chance at rebuttal, the assessor pointed out something on my evidence page 13 of this document. So I did have an opportunity to check into this, and the board will be getting a follow-up letter from me. My original document was a Word document, and when I opened it up to copy it and paste it, there was an auto-fill of date. So it changed the date to November 29th, 2019. That's the date I opened the document. Original letter from the city of Winnipeg, which is in my files, in my possession. So that was just an issue with the formatting of the letter. You'll note that the file number is 6/2004. That's the date of the hearing that relates to, and the board order was 2005-017, which was the date of the order. So those would be the right dates, and it was an autofill error on this. I have to go check and see if it saved it at that date too. So I guess the problem with it was a Word document.
Your presentation?
Thank you. So rather surprisingly, I didn't recognize this site, but I did appraise this property a few years ago. I can't remember the exact date, but I have been in this building. Now, the pictures on here were not taken from that appraisal, and there's also some pictures in the document that I don't know what they belong in there, but page 6, 7, and 8 are not the subject property. That's actually 730 Taylor, so someone just got lazy in her office. And that's a different building altogether. So the building is
6, 7, 8?
6, 7, and 8. Bad pictures. So the building is a house, and what modifications were put on it is that the front porch was built out and covered. So if you're looking at the arches up front, that originally was a porch, and that was covered at a later date. And the original house is, as it was structurally, there's a second floor, and the back was an addition that was built on it, extending out for a work area. The basement is typical of a 1920 basement, typical headbanger, even for our illustrious chairman. I'm pretty sure he would hit his head on it too if he were down there. The basements in this era were generally just designed for putting your equipment down. Now this one, if I'm recalling, was lifted and poured at one point in time, but the resulting height is still sub 6 feet. The upper level was, which were originally bedrooms, are in place for the bathroom and service areas, and there's a small kitchen up there. Last time I was up there, we do not consider this to be rentable space at all. It might be accessory space, but it's not rentable on the market. That's an unfair definition, and the problem with using this in the market are standards. When a leasing agent of any sort who's licensed goes to a property and leases a site, they have to live with rentable standards. They don't make up numbers and say, I've got 3,300 square feet, because they lose their license. They have to follow it. Upper levels aren't rentable, basements aren't rentable, especially in converted houses. They could only report 1,825 square feet. That takes us to page 3 of my document, and these are also done under the same standard. So we can't compare buildings that are measured under a different standard with ones that we're appraising. That's just a very, well, in golf it's called a foot wedge, but I don't know what they do in our business, but I guess we call it the foot wedge too, because it's inappropriate, completely inappropriate. So looking at these rents, we have a number in parts of the city that are less than prime, some on Main Street, some on Sherbrooke, and those are generally the ones that we've been looking at. Our problem with rental rates, and I heard the assessor say it, is to look for rental rates on properties like this is difficult, but it's not just the element of owner occupancy, it's the element of measurement, because when you're dealing with converted houses, we actually came across one the other day that was substantially lower than 1341 in here, and I'm looking at page 3, and the person who wrote this up thought that the 1341 was a decent rate. I neither agree nor disagree. That's a superior property with parking up front and in a strip mall. But it would be somewhat resembling what we should be looking at for the subject. And this is on the basis of using comparables that are comparables. The vacancy rates applied in this case, we looked at the Johnson report, and this is an error in that the person who wrote this up had looked at the office overall rates and suburban office rates. This is miscellaneous, so this is a garbage rate. Sorry, that's the informal term. It's just lower end of the rate, but I'm not changing anything here. The actual rate would be higher than this for a property like this, not desirable. In terms of the non-recoverables, we're just going to stick with 5% on this. It's an owner-occupied property. Our study on page 42 to 46 is a study of better properties, and these are Collier's managed properties, all of them, and these are net properties. And we went through these. There's a typo, which we still haven't corrected. The December 19 is a typo. It's December 18 on this. Our range is shown on page 46, and my conclusions are based primarily on the graphing of these. When we have 86 properties on page 46 and we put them on a graph, there are ones that have non-recoverables at the high end of the range, in the 30% range, and those are properties that are experiencing turnovers. So they would be impacted by unit upgrades required, by leasing costs, and any other turnover costs. The code upgrade is a big issue these days. You turn over a unit, and you're automatically almost hit with at least $40,000 in costs on code upgrade, which relate to fresh air and barrier-free access. It's a fact of life. Those costs are not recoverable, other than the normal upgrade, which is the cosmetic cleanup, carpets, drapes, get blinds, etc. A stabilized property with very low turnover would then be in the 7% range, where this graph levels out. And that's generally, you can see that there's a very strong line along there, and as a property grows in value, the impact of the vacancies becomes less as well. That's one of the reasons that we would use the rates we have, which is 5% on non-recoverables. The structural reserve in this particular property could be a million things. It's a converted house. So the heating units, the structure, the envelope, they're all in question. Now, when I appraised it, the back level was uneven compared to the main level. Very typical with additions, because when people add on, they'll have a full foundation in their main building, but they cheap out on the addition. They only put a crawl space, and it shifts. That and that's what this one suffers from. The shortfall is quite heavily skewed on the tax base. This property is nowhere near worth as much as this, but the taxes are going to indicate a very, very high shortfall. And I just want to quickly double check that number. Yes, it's 752. Now that's based on 1,825 square feet. It would be lower with more square feet, but then it's applied to more square feet, so the number won't change. So it's essentially the tax rate that's driving this site extremely high as far as shortfall. So it alone exceeds the city's allowance, and there's no dodging taxes when you're vacant. The utilities come from we're using those from the city's business assessment roll as a stabilized number, because, as I said earlier, utilities will vary with empty versus full, and the unit use. Dental office will consume more water, so you can't generally rely on their water rate. And repair and maintenance is an estimate of $2, which is fairly basic. So taking all that, my NOI $20,121, and we're capping at 9.25%. Big difference in the assessed value. I don't think we've ever brought this one to hearing before. The cap rates on this one, this is not an investment property. This doesn't go in anybody's cap rate table. To do so is a severe bad thing to do, severely inappropriate. You can't call a converted house in any way close to being an investment property. Now, we do have a couple of ones to look at, and on page 37 and 38 we have a few. 848 Jubilee was probably the lowest cap I've ever seen, and this was a house conversion on Jubilee. Now, they did an excellent job on it. It was an office, and it became a hair salon, and it was sold after that at an indicated cap of 8.04%. Very good job on it. On the other hand, at the bottom of the page, we have 819 Sargent, which is upper floor and lower floor in a bad neighborhood. And I'm saying bad neighborhood not in the social sense, whether that's true or not, but in the investment interest sense, 10.8%. That would be much closer to what the subject would experience. Based on that and our own decision, cap at 9.25 has an investment property indicating a value rounded to $218,000. Now, what I've been doing lately is I find the whole concept of the income approach on properties like this to be inappropriate, wrong, because they don't sell on that basis. They're going to sell on the basis of one owner to another. So my indicated value is, again, we are disregarding the basement by just common sense, and the upper floor is non-contributory. We do have a value of a little over $110 a foot, and that's way higher than market will be on Ellis Avenue at this point in Ellis. You would typically see retail properties in the $60 to $70 range. So I think that this is a bit on the high side. And regardless of what it was assessed at last year, I can't speak to what that was or what it is, but on the market, $218,000 is a fairly high number. That's my presentation.
I thank you. Mr. Paul, questions?
Give me 1 second, please.
Okay.
You indicated that there is no rent or no consideration given to the upper area and the basement area. Can you confirm what's being done in the upper area? Is it a staff lounge?
The last time I was up there was a restroom and a staff sitting area.
So you would need that for any business to operate.
No?
You can have a business without a staff lounge, eating area, or washroom?
Well, there was a washroom on the main floor as well. They're not necessary areas. One could classify them as accessory use. My instinct here would have been probably to select a lower rental rate and then adjust it upwards for the accessory use of the 500 feet. It's not rentable by anybody's standard. So,
leading into my next question, I guess you now confirming that these are the wrong pictures, so you can actually, as an owner, or as an agent representing the owner, show us what the substandard areas are, if they are indeed.
I'm under oath. I've inspected the property, although it was a few years ago. I've given a good description of the area. I don't think we have to use our imaginations to understand what a 1920 house on Ellis is going to look like.
On your page 3, the only real comparables that we have are, again, the 83 Sherbrooke, and only 2 of them are chiropractor and medical related.
Well, there are some other rents that we had looked at, and these are our office uses and various uses, so we do look at a variety of rents. Our focus here is on finding rents that are valid rents, being free of inducements and being measured the right way. So those are rather lacking in this area. I did come across one a few days ago on Notre Dame. Too late to put it in.
So in your evidence page for market rent, you have virtually no evidence of market rent, is what I'm indicating.
That's a statement. That's your opinion. I disagree.
Okay. All right, that's fair. I've already commented on the post-reference nature of the June 2018 Johnson report submittal. I'll let the panel.
Well, you've commented on it, but you have to produce evidence to say it's post-reference. I've produced evidence. I've provided a statement on first-hand conversation with the author of this report that this is how it is collected.
maybe my next question, you indicated the person who wrote this report, I neither agree or disagree when you're referencing the $13.41. Then you also indicated that you did an appraisal on it. Can you clarify? It sounds like I wasn't following along. So someone else wrote this report, yet you've done an appraisal on the property?
Yes, I did not author this report. I have done an appraisal on this property.
So you can't confirm what the appraisal was for or what the value was?
Well, I think that that's improper. It's a different use and function, and certainly not appropriate question.
Okay, gentlemen, that's it, okay?
Okay.
Next question. There was a sale in 2001, although 17 years past the reference date, or before the reference date, which is a completely different market, a lower market, because commercial property generally increases significantly over the last decade. We have a sworn value of $180,000. Can you indicate why your value at $218,000 in a rising marketplace?
Well, in reference to your question, first of all, the sale was $10.
The sworn value was...
So the sale was between related parties, not market. And the second part of your question is you're talking about a commercial increasing market. That's not the case. The untruth about people saying the markets are going to increase is that they're not using the same sample size. It's quite true that rents on new sites, like Seasons the Tuxedo, are going to greatly exceed those on Ellis. So when you would bring those into the database, the average rent goes up. The concept of looking for a commercial increase is to look at same site sales. And while retail areas have developed in the shopping center areas, they have declined on the traditional areas. This is one of the traditional areas. It's going nowhere.
You indicated two capitalization rates, one at 1819 Sargent. This is a 17,000 square foot strip mall. My opinion is that it was sold in May of 2013. My opinion is that well, I don't think it's comparable. How would you consider a strip mall considerable comparison to the subject property?
Well, concerning your opinion to a question is objectionable, but in any event, it's my opinion as an appraiser that the sale bears worthy of scrutiny in relation to the subject because of the factors surrounding it, the location, the detrimental location, and the second level, which has been chronically vacant for most of its life. I find it a very interesting example. As far as other cap rate sales, they're very few and far in between for properties like this because they're not investment properties. This is the closest anyone can have. I could suggest you could look at any of the other properties and simply say it's got to be higher than those because it's worse.
Okay. I would generally agree with your commentary on it's difficult upon capitalization rate material, given they're pretty much all owner-occupied. But I do agree with 848 Jubilee as being an appropriate comparison. The only issue is that for a November 2014 sale, which is 3.5 years before the reference date, and we see a declining capitalization rate, lowering capitalization rates, a compression of 0.39% seems quite reasonable in reference to 8.40% versus a 7.65%. So this capitalization rate actually proves our value.
No, it doesn't, because it's a unique property. It backs onto a river lot. The redevelopment of it was done by a professional contractor, so it wasn't like the subject property, which was very rudimentary, very do-it-yourself. So it's more closer to the south part of Winnipeg. It's not at all in the same neighborhood. It's just there to provide another example.
That's all the questions I have.
Thank you, Ms. McFadden.
I'm a little concerned about this pretty significant difference in the size of the leasable area, because that and the cap rate really are the biggest areas of contention. So you've spoken to the fact that this is not leasable at all, although would the storage area be leasable?
Oh, no, never. We, on a listing, all good, strong market data that's developed by professionals has to meet a standard, and whether they're a broker, an appraiser, or a property manager, they have to come from a standard. And the typical standard is BOMA. And BOMA has specific guidelines, and so the guideline on this for BOMA would be, of course, we would never have the basement, and then the second floor would have to be based on the practical considerations such as access, size, facilities, utilities, demisability, and market practice. And that BOMA always defers to market practice. In a broker's world, when one looks at advertisements that are put forward in the market, they will always be without this on a commercial basis because it's not commercial. Now, on a residential basis, you would list all the upper level. You could list 1,800 on the main and 500 on the second floor because that's the residential standard. So there are different standards. But then the issue becomes, if you're comparing apples to apples, then you've got rents that have been established with standards, then where does the adjustment lie? For example, most all of mine are BOMA established rents, which means that at some point there's been an adjustment for non-rental area. And the minimum, we call it gross up, is about 7%. So, which means that if I was presenting you a rent at $10, it's actually $9.30 with the gross up, because then you add the gross up back in. Gross up is a different, I'm actually not saying the right words. Gross up there's two deductions from size in BOMA. One is common area, that's the gross up. The other is non-usable area, which are deletions. So the two have different factors. But the bottom line is, if you took a standard floor plate of any commercial property, you're going to generally have deductions for non-rentable areas. Exceptions would be one-floor strip malls that are all self-contained, but other buildings would have a concrete example is this particular building here and all of its attachments. So not included in value would be stairwells, elevators, and mechanical areas. Deducted from the rentable area but grossed up back in are hallways, foyers, and on some cases bathrooms, depends what floor you're on. But the point is that it never equals the gross area. So taking a subject property without deducting for the non-rentable areas and then applying rents from buildings where it has been done is misleading. And that's why we're quite critical on this application of it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, may I redirect to the assessor?
Sure.
You may have answered this earlier, I'm not sure, but have you inspected this property? So you have not seen whether the basement is usable?
No, I just looked out the online, they have a website.
And if in fact it were the case that and we have verbal evidence of this, that the basement was below 6 feet, would the city consider that to be leaseable area?
I'd have to take a look. I'd have to walk and see, or at least see pictures. As far as if it's to the point where head height would interfere, yeah, there could be a balance for that. But there's been no evidence presented on that. There's been no evidence presented of any interior by the appellant.
So if the, this isn't for today's hearing, but if the appellant or if the applicant were to invite the assessment department to view this property,
are you saying if we had an inspection after the fact and we walked through it?
No, I'm saying on a go-forward basis. That's something the city would do an inspection at the request of the applicant.
If the owner would make a request to have the assessment department come out and revisit it, the inspector would go through, whether it be me or the inspector, we could make a change.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sawatsky?
Mr. Neufeld, I want 3 numbers.
Okay.
I want in square footage of the main, I want the square footage of the basement, and the square footage of the second floor.
Well, I don't have the basement exactly, because the main, we have at 1825.
Right.
The upper level, I'm willing to accept the well, no, it's a half wall, so I don't know for sure. I just looked at it, it's a half wall. Even under residential, that's not going to be, I think it was 500 square foot original building with the front porch developed outwards for an entranceway, and then the back added on without basement. I think the basement is probably 500 feet, but I'm not entirely sure. The original building is, I think, 500 square feet plan area. The second level, oh, wait a sec. Yeah, no, the addition, yes, the addition went out past the house. Okay. On the picture, the overhead.
Your overhead?
Yeah, where the red dot is on the square in the middle, I believe that's 500 square feet in the middle. And I believe that's another 500 square feet to the south, or upper. In this case, the picture's upside down, and approximately 825 at the rear.
Okay, so roughly 500 square feet on the upper level, 825.
Well, 500, but then if you look at the picture, it's a half wall. So even on the residential side, they can't measure that as a full floor area. I think they cut it in half, so they call it 250 in the residential world. 3/4. Yeah, in the basement, from my memory, the basement was only under the original 500 square feet.
The assessor has indicated 1,000 square feet for
1,200 for the basement.
1,200 for the basement.
That's based on what was submitted, sorry? Based on what was submitted?
We would have, like, I've never inspected the property, I look for the permits, but it's obviously been done quite some time ago. We don't have any plans or anything really to work from that I can find. What I have is just what our notes are indicating 1,200 square feet for basement area, 1,825 for main area, and 500 for upper area.
And you calculated, let's see, I think you're 235. 2,325 is the main floor and the upper floor. Good, I got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Summation, either party?
No.
Just briefly, yeah, I apologize. I'd forgotten. I mean, the way we're working these days, I'm not looking at a lot of these until I show up for hearing. And I'd forgotten I had inspected it years ago, and my mistake. I am going from memory, but I think our number is quite strong. Thank you.
I thank you. I think that concludes our business, Mr. Newfield. So thank you for your presentations, and results very soon.
Thank Gary for his patience.
Yeah. Mr. Reimer, you may come forward. We'll have you affirmed.
Thank you.
And like Mr. Newfield said, thank you for your patience.
Please state your name. Confirm the evidence you present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you.
Mr. Reimer, the property at 2735, you are What are we doing there?
We are not making any submissions. We're asking the board and Mr. Cole just to refer to Mr. Neufeld's submissions concerning that property.
Okay. Thank you. We'll go on to Taché. 396
Can we
Taché.
do 154 Provenche as there's a wreck? It'll be quick.
You want to do Provenche?
That's okay with you, Phil?
Okay.
File number is 1939.
Go ahead.
06. Roll number is 0609324790. Address is 154 Provenche. Roll year is for 2020, and the assessed value is for $735,000. If you turn to my page 8, shows the property. Quite a bit of land area. For Provenche, if you look at the next page, is on page 8. It is a below standard office medical. It was a chiropractic center at one point. As you can see from the pictures, it's a subpar. After review of marketplace data and a review with the appellant, we are in agreement that our estimated value should be $497,000. Give the breakdown if you need it.
I think it's probably best.
Okay.
So just give us your NOI and cap rate.
We changed a few things.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'll give you the potential rent.
Whatever you want to do.
Potential rent is $39,420. That's based on $13 for the main floor and $5 for a substandard basement finish in the basement. Given that it's vacant and the below average nature of the property, an increase of vacancy to 9%. Produces an effective gross income of $35,872. Our standard parameters at 2% and $7 for shortfall gives us an NOI of $35,561. And our cap rate we increased to 6.75%, which gives us our value at $497,000. That value, bear with me here. Is roughly $49.73 a square foot when you break it back to land, which, all things being equal, it might be a scrape. So it's kind of, it's hovering where the income and the land is kind of right between each other, so I think that's a fair value.
Mr. Reimer, are you in agreement?
We're in agreement with the value of $497,000.
Okay. Questions, panel members?
No question.
Okay. And then we'll go on to the last one that we have is 396 Taché. Mr. Paul, whenever you're ready.
File number is 193886. Roll number is 0607045810. Civic address is 396 Taché. And the 2020 assessment is for $10,569,000. We have a taxable portion of $6,381,000. Exempt status of $1,592,000, and a taxable school exemption of $2,596,000. The property was built in 1976, has a leasable area of 56,781 square feet. If you look at the property, it is on page 12. It's right across from the hospital, medical office. We have the attached IME. So we have quite a reflective IME of what other properties managing and reported on the income statement. There's a couple issues here I'll review in a second as we go through the rent roll. I'm not going to go through the whole rent roll, it's number of pages, but we're not too far off in renting. So, on my comparables, we turn to my comparables. Page 4 is actually Tache building. We made an adjustment down from 1.06% downwards to account for what was indicated to be management fees that were non-recoverable. After reviewing the rent roll, it appears that those non-recoverable management fees were related to the parking income stream only and not to the actual building rents. So we made an adjustment here to make up an allowance for that. Turns out that after looking at it again, we should have moved that because they are recovering the actual building management fees. So when we look through the comparables, page 3, when everything's added in, again with the slightly adjusted downward rent, we have an average rent of $17.11 and weighted average of $70.15 and a median of $15.51. If you look at our page 5, we have $16.13 for the class code 60T area of 32,462 square feet. When we run our parameters through, as you guys can read, we've been through all day, our effective gross income is, I should say at 5.5% vacancy, our effective gross income is at $494,843. Expenses at 2%, and the shortfall at $7 gives us a net effective operating income, or net operating income of $472,488. Capped at 7.55 gives us $6,257,589. We have an additional value of $123,000. I'm not exactly sure where that came from. I apologize. Me and Kara looked at it. I'm not exactly sure. We haven't added it in here and then taken out.
But it's minus that the stream 3.
Yeah, we've added it in and then taken it out, so it balances out. But I have no idea why it's there. I'll be honest. I don't know if this was a glitch or if there was a balancing hit of some kind. I'm not sure, but it doesn't seem to affect anything. So you're adding it in, but you're taking it off. So. And having said that, it's only about 1.2% of the approximate, but it's nominal anyway. So our value is approximately $6,381,000. On the next page is our class code 40 stream. We have for $14,474,015.04, which produces a potential gross income of $270,556. Again, all the same standard parameters I just talked to produces our value, or our net operating income of $195,999, which capped at 7.55% gives us $2,596,000. Boy, it's been a long day. I apologize. I didn't know how to play last night. And then on the 40E income stream, for 9,845 square feet, we have an average rental rate of $14.62 square foot, a PGI of $143,915. And again, all the same standard parameters that we just discussed gives us a net operating income of $129,490, capped at 7.55%. Which gives us $1,715,099. Then we take off the $123,000, works down to be $1,592,000. So, if you look at a summary of our 3 streams, income streams on page 9, for a potential rent of $885,214, we have an average of $15.59 a square foot. And then again, our same standard parameters, which produces the value at $10,569,000. So that being said, given the $123,000 balances out, I wasn't sure. I quickly caught it outside. That balances out, so that's out of the equation. I think that's reasonable and performing pretty much at what the subject property is in terms of net rent. So with that, I'll open the questions.
Thank you. Mr. Reimer?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask the panel members and Mr. Pohl to turn briefly to page 3. And Mr. Pohl's summary is correct. Certainly there's only 2 issues in this case. One relates to the potential net rent, and the other relates to the 5% non-recoverable, so I'll restrict my questions to basically those issues. So Mr. Pohl, on page 3, just to confirm, all the comparables that are 1020 Lorimer, that's the much newer office building that we were talking about earlier today, correct?
Yes.
Okay, with a 2012 year. And of course, at the 2012, they've been commanding rents that are, with that newer building, significantly higher than this older building, correct?
Correct.
And then the only other question, there's 2077 Pembina, which is Pembina Village. That's comp 6, 13, 17, 20.
Sorry, what comp?
2077 Pembina.
Which comp number? Sorry.
So comp number 6 and 13 and 17, 22,
6, 7, 13.
and 20. Those are all, like, that's a one-story building, as I recall it, right? With Pembina Village? Like, these are all my point being, these are all main floor rents.
Yeah.
And similarly with Roblin, the comp 18 and 19, those would also be main floor rents.
Yeah.
Okay.
The unit numbers are on them, so
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And similarly then, the 1555 St. Mary's Road, this comps 39, 40, and 43, those again would be main floor rents.
Unit number 2 would most likely be the second floor rent, and unit 102 would be a main floor rent.
Okay. And 103 as well, a couple of down.
Yeah, it'd be a main floor as well.
Okay. So I'm generalizing, but certainly between that newer building and the main floor rents, that is significantly bringing up the average rent on the chart. Would you agree with that? I'm not going to calculate the math, but it looks like
I wouldn't necessarily say significantly, but it would definitely influence it up.
Well, let's go through that though then. Because
like, what do you in terms as far as like
with Lorimer being the much newer building, and then those main floor rents on Pembina Village and such, I'm suggesting to Mr. Pohl, those are the bulk, the overwhelming majority of the rents that are remaining for the subject or older buildings or rents that aren't main floor. Because of course we've got some main floor rents here, but the bulk of the rental income for the subject is upper floor rents. And I'd suggest that the average, your average and weighted average and median would go down very, very significantly, and I'm saying by like a couple of bucks at least when you start factoring in the newer building at Lorimer and the main.
Okay, yeah, $1 or $2 possibly, yes.
Okay.
I'm not saying I thought you meant like 5
no.
significantly.
I'm saying a couple of bucks.
You're saying $1 or $2, that's like under 15%, so yeah, that would be
Yeah.
right.
Okay, and then just briefly going to page 9. That's probably the easiest way to look at the remaining issue. So the department, as you've indicated, this is, and what's on, to be clear, page 9, this is entirely model driven right from top to bottom,
Yeah.
right? And then, so the 2% is the department's position, as we well know, the 2% being the non-recoverable allowance, but the department, to be clear, up until this cycle had applied an additional allowance known as the management expense of 5%.
Yeah.
And that's now been removed.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Those are my questions. Thank you.
I thank you. Linda, any questions?
I don't think so, no, thank you.
Mr. Sawatsky?
I have no questions.
I have none either. So, Mr. Reimer?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I have a corrected valuation because my shortfall rate that I had intended to agree with the department's rate was actually incorrectly listed as $9, and I believe it should be $7.
Okay.
So I've actually revised my value up. So I'd ask the board and Mr. Pohl to refer to this valuation with the higher total value based on the $7 shortfall rate rather than $9. The nature of the issue, though, hasn't changed. So Mr. Pohl had presented his brief, and if you recall, if you have his page 9 open, and then turn to our page 7 initially, the one issue relates to the potential net rent to be calculated on the subject. Now, the departments, and granted, we are not far apart, but we believe we've been very, very fair in our approach, and that our calculation would represent an appropriate amount, and that's $863,473. So we're about $22,000 lower based on the performance of the property as shown on page 7. And I believe, based on, as I suggested to Mr. Pohl, based on the, this is a much older building than 10 Larimer, and only a small portion of the rents relate to main floor space, so I believe it would be entirely consistent with the market data presented by Mr. Pohl when one considers those factors, in this case concerning the subject. So that's one issue. And then, of course, the ongoing debate relating to the subject and of course, all commercial and industrial properties. On page 15, actually, we can just go to my handout rather than page 15, because my handout's got the corrected number. But you'll see, Mr. Chairman, there's a non-recoverable expense allowance of 5%, and we are, for the reasons that we submit in our non-recoverable expense study, we are requesting that this board reinstate the 5% allowance. Certainly, we're very strongly of the view that the nature of a net lease hasn't changed in the past 25 years and 30 years, and the department's had it right all along up until this cycle. And we're not disputing, I'm going to paraphrase this because I know all three of the board members here have heard this, and Mr. Pohl certainly, we've all been through this many, many times. We maintain very strongly that the intent of the allowance was not relating to specifically to management fees, but rather was an unrecovered expense allowance for relating to proper and competent operation and management of the properties, relating to things like leasing commissions, advertising and marketing, and professional fees. And as we state in our study, we've got a chart on page, I think it's 10A of the study, and these are the 32 properties that we have presented, and the data underpinning the statistics are attached. And the data, we believe, strongly supports the restoration of the 5% allowance. We continue to believe that the obviously any investor that's going to be valuing the property is going to take that an unrecovered expense allowance and factor that into their valuation. I don't believe, based on past presentations by the department, I don't believe the department disputes the nature of the unrecovered expense allowance, but they're suggesting as a jurisdictional exception. We certainly believe that the municipal board cases are based on the evidence that was before them. The applicants were typically looking for a net effective rent, and we're specifically not suggesting that, and we're not doing that. We are suggesting a stabilized allowance of 5% that was still applied by the municipal board in those cases, in all cases except one, should continue to apply here. And we're asking the board to restore that 5% allowance. And then if you look in the handout with the corrected valuation, based upon the potential rent of $863,473, and then running it through with the parameters as shown there, including the 5% non-recoverable and the 7.55% cap, which we're not disputing, we come in at a value of $9,759,446. Now, Mr. Pohl's talked about the $123,000. I had understood there's three parking lots that are affiliated with the subject. Two of the three lots are revenue generating, and they're reflected on the income statement. But the one lot, there's a very small lot that I understood was for staff parking for the subject, or for this building, which is why I've taken the assessed value for just that lot off of $123,000. I'm not sure if that's the answer, and Mr. Pohl and I did review that. So my request, as you can see on the page, does include the deduction of the $123,000 for that one small lot. So the net value that we're suggesting is $9,636,000 for the subject. And then you'll see in my handwritten breakdown on the right-hand side, there are three different classifications for the subject, and the breakdown of the three classifications is based on the same proportions as the proportions exist on the current assessment, and that's how I arrived at those figures. So that is my request this afternoon. Thank you.
I thank you, sir. Mr. Pohl, questions?
Not really, I'll just kind of generally talk to it. Our rent is about 6% off of each other's, it's about 6% below mine, correct?
I'm sorry, so my potential rent?
Yeah, my potential rent versus your potential rent, I'm about 6% higher than
I'm
you.
going to say that's, yes, I would agree with that.
Just going through the rent roll here, it seems the majority of the property has had long-term tenants, but most of the leases seem to be starting in 17, 15, in that range.
There are quite a number of them, yeah. Yeah, on page 7 indeed.
When I look at the last page, on my page 33, or their page 13, they're getting a net rent of $15.33 a square foot, highlighted in yellow. So you're asking for $15.09, our mall was about 50 cents higher, and they're about in between us. Highlighted in yellow.
Indeed, 1533. I see the number you're referring to.
Yeah, and then highlighted in yellow again below, they're approximately 3.84% vacant, 2 units out of 40.
On this snapshot, yes.
Yeah, snapshot,
Yep,
obviously.
yep, indeed.
Given the proximity to the hospital, would that not indicate a better than potential location?
In terms of the vacancy rate?
In terms of just simple tenancy, meaning number of referrals coming off the hospital, you want doctors right across the street in the private practices.
Well, the proximity to the hospital is definitely an advantage. That will be reflected in the rents, but it's, again, there are 2 units. If you look on the rent roll, the snapshot, there's unit 402 and 700 that amounted to about, call it 2,200 feet that are vacant, and certainly vacancies. It's not like the property will have 0 vacancy or that it's commanding an exceptionally high rent like Lorimer, for instance. But
No.
having this clinic beside St. Boniface Hospital is the location is good for this kind of practice. There's no doubt.
So the strength in the location, there's off-site influence that are positive.
And that's reflected in the rents, I suggest, that they're getting.
So realistically, our argument, although you're asking for about a 5% for non-recoverable put back in, our rent is a little bit, our rents are kind of 2.5%, whereas where you're putting in where they are and where I am, if you look at the median between. And then also, we're about 1.5% below the actual vacancy. So all things added up, we're pretty much right at the same spot, is what I'm getting at.
Well, I guess for the snapshot, yes, I guess I'd suggest a 5.5%.